All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Spotlight. We're nearing the end of season 1 here, and we have a brand new guest, Jennifer Holliday, who is the vice president of the student body for this next calendar year. Kind of explained it was a little confusing, but I think I get it. Jennifer, what are some things that you want people to know about you? Like, what do you think are the most important things about you?
Wow, we are just diving right in. Most important things about me. Well, I guess I kind of have always described myself. This actually takes me back to my FFA days, I feel like, because it was always like questions of like, what are some important things people should know about you? And I like to describe myself as one of those children's books that has like 5 different story plots in the same book, and there's no reason that there's 5 different story plots in the same book, but they're there. So I grew up on a farm. I love communications. I work for a podcast company, used to work for a radio station, vice president of the student body. So I love doing things that kind of like create change and help others. Anything that I can do to help people that is not myself, I'll be there. I love doing things like that. Oh my goodness. I don't know. I could literally tell you so many different random things. I have 2 nephews. I have 2 sisters.
We're getting the lore.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but I guess that's kind of how I would describe myself.
So you'd say you're like pretty multifaceted.
Yes.
And when I was looking at your questionnaire, there was a deeper stone because I reached out to you because Abby suggested you. And so then I was like, okay, here's just an Abby friend. You know what I mean? And so then I looked and it's like, okay, you're president of the student body, or vice president of the student body, which is someone that I've been trying to reach out to for an entire year now, is like a student government official. I've been trying to...
You've been trying to reach out to Jacob and Jaden and they never got back to you?
No. So here's the gossip on... They're both fantastic and they're both really busy.
Yeah.
I reached out to them. They responded very quickly. Then it took them like a week to respond. Then we actually met up and did that meeting in the student government office.
Yeah.
And then we scheduled the time. The day before, they're like, hey, I have like 3 finals, or I have like 3 exams this week. Can we do it another time? And I was like, yeah, just message me when time is less stressful.
Gotcha.
And they haven't since. And I messaged them and they haven't since. But I understand like they're about to leave. They're about to like graduate. Like they got more important things to do than than go on a random dude's podcast.
Elijah, you just gave me the perfect ammunition to go and give them a little crap later.
I would say don't say anything. Just show them this video.
Just show them the video. I will do that.
With them. Just share it with them. Be like, I was on this awesome podcast, the greatest experience of my whole life. If only other people could have been a part of this, and then send it to them.
Absolutely, no, I will do that.
they're very cool guys. I liked working with them, and I wish I could have gotten the episode, but the stars just did not align.
That's okay. And now you have me here.
I was saying now I have you, and that's why I was so excited. But then I look and I see working on multiple podcasts and medias. I was like, oh, here we go. So we got a lot to nerd out about. But, first and foremost, I do wanna get that student government Phil. So why are you in student government? Like why here? And then what was kind of like your journey to getting here?
Absolutely. So when I first came to Iowa State, I'm gonna be 100% honest. I was terrified to come to college. I'm a first-gen student. And I am definitely kind of a homebody. So being with my family, that has always been like the best thing in life is being with my family. So even though I'm only an hour and a half away, it was a terrifying journey. So I had to really try and like reach out and use my friend connections that I already had here at Iowa State when I came to make this my new home. And so that's exactly what I did with student government. I had a girl that I knew through FFA, and she was serving as senior director of communications at the time. And she was like, hey, I think you should apply to be on our committee. And I was like, say no more. I got you. So then I joined student government as an at-large on the public relations committee. And then like that year was a blast. Clearly I love public relations type of things because I love podcasts, radio, video, all of the good stuff. Then that led me to being a Cal senator. And we were not even halfway through my term as a Cal senator when Emily Roberts, who is my president in the slate of us two, she asked me to go get pizza with her one day. Sorry if you've heard this story before, listeners. I kind of tell it a lot. But Emily and I did not know each other. Like, literally, I was like, who is this girl? Why is she asking me to go get pizza with her? And she just dropped on me when we were standing at Godfather's Pizza in the MU food court. And she was like, I've been watching you like do your senator duties, and I think you're pretty awesome. So you should run for vice president with me. And I was like, let me think about that. That's a big ball to drop.
Yeah.
But after about a month, I kind of came to my senses and I realized just how much I really do love student government. Throughout my time, I've been able to connect with, well, specifically when I was a Cal Senator, I specifically was able to connect with the dean of the college and work with so many amazing students to find ways to make Cal's better for those within it. So now I'm planning on doing exactly that within my vice presidency and work with students and faculty and admin across the university to make it even better than it already is. Because I just think that Iowa State, it's became my home, and I'm clearly not terrified to be here anymore. And I want to make that a place for every other student as well.
Wow, so your origin story starts in a Godfather's Pizza.
It does.
Like a random lunch date with a random person.
Yes.
And then now you're here.
Exactly. And we're living together next year. So we
Wow.
Yes, we really went from strangers to besties in a matter of 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Strangers to besties to coworkers to like the face of, you know, Iowa State for the next like year,
Right.
or as far as the students go. I mean, that's crazy.
It is.
That's so cool. And so it was kind of like the Cal's senatorship that kind of made you think that you could like do this, that like showed you your interest in this. That was like,
Yes.
this is kind of like the next big step to that progress then?
Yes, absolutely. So I actually, when I was doing my Cal's senator term, I wasn't positive of what direction I was thinking I was going to go towards for the upcoming term in student government. I was leaning more towards applying for a cabinet position, probably senior director of communications, because love communications. But you know, we kind of just bypassed that whole cabinet position step and just went to the one right above it.
Play some leapfrog here.
Yeah.
Get to the top.
But I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, that's so sweet. And I'm kind of wondering, so you're talking about like, you know, making Iowa State better, like using the Cals, like kind of pushing towards Cal. So what are some of like your dreams? So if this is like a time capsule for, you know, what you want to get done and what's going to get done at the end of next year, like walk me through what are some of the things that you want to do? Like what's your platform?
Okay. So Emily and I ran on a platform. It was for each student, and each stood for empowerment, academics, community, and health. And underneath each of those, we had 3 goals for the 4 main platform points. I will not make you sit here and listen to all 12 of those goals. But my absolute dream one that I will work incredibly hard to accomplish over this next year is what Emily and I call the accessibility map. And so we have all of these different accessibility resources on campus. So we have knowledge of what type of door handles there are in buildings, where handicap parking is, elevators, stair steps, all of the good things that many people need, many people don't need, but many people also just need it every once in a while, depending on what's going on in their life. Say they broke a leg or something. But these aren't accessible for our students. So we want to put them all in one map and hopefully get it put on the MyState app. So it's just right on every student's phone. And if they need it, they can just look it right up and have it right there in their pocket.
Wow. And so what inspired you to start pursuing that? Like what's the story behind like, because that's always been the most interesting thing to me, because when Jacob and Jaden had presented to my hall council before they were elected, they were talking about like Safe Ride, and they were talking about these apps and things that they wanted to create, but they didn't really go, they went into like, this is why we wanted to do it. So like what's the origin of that thought? Like what inspired you to think about this handicap and this accessibility?
Honestly, I think it's just growing up, and I'm a detail person. I notice the little things. And so I always notice when there's like someone in the room who may need just an extra hand or something that they don't have. Like, it's kind of like the concept of equity. Like, not everybody gets the same thing, but they get what they need to be able to be successful. And so that's kind of what I just have always strove for. I guess growing up, in case you haven't noticed, sometimes it's more noticeable than others. I have a lisp, and I'm pretty open about it now. I used to be very self-conscious, but now it's just like a thing that is a part of me. And I know that other people have way more noticeable lisps and some people don't. And I think that everybody needs these resources to be able to be successful. Like, I went to speech therapy when I was a child. because I needed that to be successful. So I just want that these students that may need to know what door handles are in each room, because some are definitely harder to open than others depending on your bodily situation, to be able to be successful and thrive here at Iowa State.
Wow. Wow. And so that's like the number one dream. And it's crazy. It's crazy because not everybody, I mean, when presented with the opportunity, like, I'm going to create change at Iowa State, if you told me, like, Elijah, change something at Iowa State, like, do something for the better, I don't know how many ideas I would have, like, to do it. And so you have, like, kind of this big opportunity, one that doesn't necessarily pertain to you, like, directly. It's something that you just thought of for other people. And I think that's, like, it's such a good role to have, to be like, I'm going to aspire this change to something that I kind of thought of, you know, on its own, like, unrelated to me. And I think that's actually super cool.
Thank you.
What are some of the other, give me like two more. I'm curious as what are some of the other big things you're doing?
Okay. So one that Emily is super passionate about, and I think is an amazing idea to keep a roll on, and we're hoping to get it implemented before the fall semester even starts actually, is the AIM Safe Word program. So the whole concept is life for students does not end when you leave campus. So a lot of our campus life ends up on Welch Avenue, you know, but sometimes people don't always end up in the safest situations on Welch Avenue. And sometimes people also, like, technically aren't supposed to be there, but they are anyways. And so we just want all of those students to know that their safety is the top priority no matter what. So this is very similar to the Angel Shot. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before. But the students would have the opportunity to go up to the bartender and order whatever this special Iowa State University Angel Shot would be. And then the bartender would actually call ISUPD. And ISUPD would come pick that student up, no questions asked, and take them to wherever they feel safest at that moment.
Wow, that actually is a super good idea. And I didn't know that wasn't as implemented. I didn't know that wasn't something that's... I'm not on Welch Avenue ever, but I didn't know that was something that wasn't implemented here. And so, is there a lack of that kind of, like, safe word here? Is, like, the Angel Shot, because I've heard of that. Is that a more common thing, or is that, like, maybe too overused so people are kind of understanding it, or?
Honestly, I'm not entirely positive because I also cannot go to Welch Avenue yet. But I just know that there has definitely been some times and situations where students weren't sure what to do. And I do think that even though the Angel Shot has become, like, very popular and well known, there's also still a good amount of audience that does not know what it is. So it's kind of like that give and take of, like, we need to find like a consistent source to use for our community. And I think also we would probably try and get signs hung up within the bars is something that Emily and I have tossed around, at least for a temporary amount of time, if not permanently, just so students were aware of that when they walked in.
Yeah, that is a super good idea. And for those of you listening who aren't aware of what the Angel Shot is, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a drink request that you order that will signal the bartender to call the police if a person feels like they're in danger. And it's kind of a discreet way to, like, say help is pretty much what it is.
Yes. Yeah. But that's a major one that Emily and I think is super important. Let's see here. Another one that we would like to work towards that's not simple, but kind of simpler is a seat notification system. So right now we're using Access Plus to sign up for classes. And I'm pretty sure we're transitioning to Workday for that instead.
Thank God. Yeah.
Yes, hopefully it'll be a lot simpler.
Access Plus is the worst website on the planet.
But within that, a lot of times you go to register for classes and the ones you want are already filled. And so then you're having to constantly go back and check, oh my gosh, has someone dropped the class yet? Are there any seats open? But by having the seat notification system, it would allow you to type in your email for this specific class that you would like to register for. And if a seat comes open, it will shoot you an email to your inbox and say, hey, a seat just popped up, like, registered right now. Because if there's one seat open and 10 people get the email, it'll be whoever makes it to it first. But it'll make it a lot simpler and less time consuming for students as well.
That's a super good idea. Wow.
Thank you.
I kind of want to go through the rest of your gameplay, because all of this stuff is stuff that you'd imagine is already implemented, but is not.
Right.
And it's kind of something that you only think about when, like, you know,
Yes.
prompted to do so.
And I cannot take credit for all of these ideas. Emily came up with a lot of them and we just built with each other and it helped a lot. Emily's a transfer student. She went to, I believe it was the University of Minnesota. Sorry, Emily, if I got that wrong. But she was able to kind of take part of her experience there from different opportunities that they had and kind of make it to ways that Iowa State University doesn't have it.
Yeah, you can like bring some of the
Yes.
successful things and then bring the opposite of the unsuccessful things here too. And
Yeah.
kind of fix it. Okay, that's really cool. What are some other ones? I'm curious.
Let's see here. We would like to begin a syllabus bank. So this is going to be one that is harder to gain traction on based off of the professor side because we would like to put a bank of all syllabi of all classes available on campus for students. So when students are registering for their classes, they can take a peek at that syllabus right before they register to know what the demands of the class may be, the attendance policy, and just more knowledge of how everything may work so they can make sure that everything is fitting okay within their personal life too. Because sometimes you have to miss class, but the professor has a strict attendance policy, and it's harder to figure that out. But if you know ahead of time, it may help out a little bit as well.
Well, and that helps a ton too with course content as well because on like student.org they have a very short description and some of those classes have a one sentence description.
Yeah.
Like you're going to talk about this. And it's like I have no idea like the difficulty of this course. I have no idea the time commitment of this course. I have no idea what I'm actually going to be learning.
Absolutely.
So that would be a super good idea for that too, just to get people like to actually be able to choose their classes. Because right now you're kind of just going off what title fits your fits your major
because
the best.
I have definitely signed up for classes before too and went in and like halfway throughout the semester, I'm like, this is literally nothing that I thought we were going to be learning about.
Yes. But like half of my classes were, and just also to know what kind of stress you could be taking on, because there's a lot of decisions now that I want to be making, but I don't really know what the course load is going to look like for next semester. So I don't want to overreach and like take a bunch of stuff, but I need to make those decisions now. So having that syllabi would be a really good, that is a good option.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. So those are a few of ideas that we would like to implement. Some of them are going to take longer than others. So we are definitely making sure to make it clear that there's no promises that things will be implemented by the next semester or anything like that. But we're going to have a lot of great members on our cabinet to help us get these in the works.
So how did campaigning go? I want to get like a backstage idea of like how did you get elected? How did campaigning go? Like what did you do for your campaign?
So I'm just gonna start out. As much as I loved it, campaigning was the most stressful 2 months of my life. When I tell you, I had no downtime, I mean it. I was running on minimal sleep and a lot of coffee.
Yeah.
But once we decided that we were going to be a pair and run together, we had to start out with our campaign photos. So once we got those taken, we actually took those November, I believe. So we were working plenty before winter break so we can make sure that when we come back, we can hit the ground running. Because for spring semester, we were back for 1 week and then campaign started the second Monday of spring semester. So you really just had to make sure that you were ready to rock and roll when you got back. So with campaigning, each slate is allowed to spend up to $2,000. So you have the option to use personal money or student funding the money through student government. Emily and I decided to use our own money because we have that financial ability, and we felt like it wasn't right that if we had the financial ability that we shouldn't be using other students' dollars to run to be their representative. But we like having that opportunity there for students who may not have that ability so they can still have this great opportunity to run and represent as well. So we did that, and we got buttons, posters, stickers. I believe that's the 3 things that we bought. We were going to do t-shirts, but then we decided not to. But those were the 3 things we bought, and we just kind of got those everywhere, all out on campus. But once campaigning started on that Monday, it was a 5-week process of literally going to as many clubs as possible. I think we counted up at the end, we went to just under 75, I think. So we really tried to push hard. Lots of thanks to College of Ag and the sorority fraternity community. We went to a lot of those areas. We tried to make sure that we were spread out throughout campus, but we also have to use our connections to make sure that we're able to get out there. So most nights, Emily and I were not together to be able to reach more ground. But we always tried to make a call or make a phone call or a text. I about said phone text, and I was like, that doesn't make sense. At the end of the night, just to give each other an update of how things were going. But it would be days of, wake up at 6:30 in the morning because I had to do my podcasting job in the morning before classes. And then I still had to be a student. And then after being a student, we had campaigning. And some nights I definitely only got like maybe 4 hours of sleep because we had some major assignments. And yeah, I still had to put the student in student government, but but now that that's all over, it's a lot more simpler and easygoing. And campaigning was stressful, but it's all worth it in the end. I highly recommend.
I was like, maybe not. It's not a huge horror story because it seems as if you're happy doing what you're doing, and it was kind of worth.
Yes.
Like in the time, and I imagine that it was nice to commit to something for so long and to like put something and then see the fruits of your labor, like by being the vice president.
Absolutely. I did definitely enjoy it. Weirdly enough, I think one of my favorite parts of the month was, so our campaign manager, her name's Charlotte, shout out to Charlotte. She made a Google spreadsheet, and literally it was each like spreadsheet was one day, and all of us put our calendars on that day. And we went through like the whole 5.5 weeks. So like we had half-hour increments on this calendar. My half-hour increments laid out for the day. So I knew exactly where I had to be and when. And I'm a very like organized person. Don't look at my room because you wouldn't think that. But in that sense, it was the best thing ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were you were booked. You had a person, a secretary, making your schedule. It's like you're the president of the United States or something. I mean, you really worked for this.
That's pretty intimidating.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Wait. So how did you get a campaign manager? So is that just like somebody you knew, or like was their job to manage people's campaigns? Like, how did that process go?
Yeah, so oftentimes to make your campaign as successful as possible, it's better to have a team, because if you don't have the team, you're having to balance campaigning and preparing and being a student and all your other duties at the same time, which is like highly impossible. So we had a team of like marketing and public relations. We had a photographer, a videographer on our team, and we had our campaign manager. So everybody just came together to really take on separate parts of the process of campaigning. So it wasn't so much on everyone's plates in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. So having our campaign manager there, she was pretty much like our kind of little secretary and helped schedule things. And she was very much so like an emotional like balance throughout the month too. She was able to keep us pepped up and going when we'd be getting down at certain times. But yeah, we met Charlotte through student government. I think Emily and her are like besties. And so Charlotte and I just kind of clicked. I served on Charlotte's Health and Wellness Committee this past year because she was the director of Health and Wellness. And we clicked through that. So yeah, but now Charlotte's leaving us to go to the Virgin Islands, I think it is.
Oh, wow. Maybe.
She's going to vet school at Ross University. So go her. Gonna miss her.
Shout out Charlotte.
Yes.
Well, I still can't believe that you met this person and then within the same breath took on this huge workload, hiring out like multiple people to spread this campaign of this job that you just signed up for with someone that you just met. It's a pretty awesome story. And so then walk me through like the campaign's success. Like what do you think made your campaign successful? And if you were to like, if you were to give advice to people running, like what made you guys work? Like what made you guys successful? And then I also am curious against like who were the people that you were running against, and like how did everything shake out at the end?
Yeah. So I think the people that we were running against were absolutely amazing. There ended up being one other slate on the ballot. Their names were Kit Claiborne and Ella Slade, both amazing individuals that are both, I think they're not coming back to student government this upcoming year because they're both getting ready to graduate in a year, and they have very heavy credit loads, let me tell you. We had a meeting with both of them after to talk because we're all still great friends. And yeah, so shout out to them. They're great. They're going to do great things. Can't wait for that. I think something that really helped Emily and I a lot was being able to separate and also having our campaign team there to help us, because we would not have been able to have as successful of social media and videos if we didn't have our campaign team by our side. And then they helped keep us grounded as well, because I think like kind of overthinking in your head can really like happen during campaign season. So by having them there, we were able to toss our thoughts around with them, and they'd be like, no, that's definitely not the way you should be thinking. Like, get us back on the right track with all of that. And then on voting days, Emily and I and a lot of our campaign team, we all took buttons, spread out around campus. We had a plan. Like some people were in this area by these bus stops, others were over here. And even though the weather was literally so bad those 2 days, it was so cold, it was raining, clammy, awful. We went out and we got rid of all of the buttons. I think we had like 300 buttons maybe, got rid of all the buttons, handed them out and talked to students. And some people were super interested in learning more about our platform, so we would stand and talk to them. Others would be like, gave me a button? Okay, sure. Tell me how to vote. But you know what? Whatever it takes to just make those connections with students, it makes it a lot more personable, I think, because I feel like if someone really is willing to be like that person with the sign on the street corner, you know, like at a car wash, and they're like, car wash this way. Like, if you're willing to do that and like stand there and direct students in the right direction and help them and talk to them like that, I think it really shows like who you are and what you're really wanting to do.
And it makes the decision really easy too. Like, I know with the people who have come to me for campaigns, like in whatever club or group I'm in, seeing their face and then watching them, like seeing them in person, as opposed to, well, one, not knowing that there's even a campaign going on is the biggest thing. Because a lot of my voting has just been voting for the only person I know who has ever spoken to me. And like, that's enough for me, just to meet them.
Right.
So I could definitely see how that really adds to a good campaign.
Awesome.
Is to standing out in the frigid cold, giving people buttons.
Yeah. Yes, I definitely did not prepare for the weather those days. You know, some days I'm just not, maybe I don't need to look at my phone. No, I've learned I need to look at my phone and the weather every morning before I leave my apartment.
Oh, yes.
But shout out to my campaign team for bringing me like a hat and gloves those days, because they were a godsend.
Yeah. And so how did everything shake out like at the end? Like, do you know how the voting went? Do you know like if it was like kind of a closer race, or if you guys like won pretty comfortably, or like how did everything shake out when you guys were done?
So I'm going to be honest, these are like public knowledge. There's like a record of all the voting online and everything. I haven't looked at it.
Wow, okay.
I've only heard of what people said. I think there was voting numbers were down this year. I think there was like 1,900 voters this year, which pretty low. Emily and I's goals are definitely to like work towards finding ways to increase that in the future. We think that ways that kind of contributed to decreasing numbers of votes this year were, one, on the second day of voting, it was the day when Wi-Fi was down on campus.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you need Wi-Fi to vote and you don't have that, you can't really vote.
Yes.
But then secondly, we transferred to a new voting system this year because the old voting system wasn't going to work out the way it normally does. And so normally there's just like one link that anybody can access. You just type it in and then you have to use like your net ID. But this year, each student got an individualized link sent to their email. So that is a little different than normal. And I think like the knowledge of change just didn't really help that. And some students don't check their email every day. So
yeah, and that might have gone to like some people's other folder, or like spam folder or something.
Exactly.
Too.
Yeah. So I think, definitely Emily and I are going to work towards finding ways to increase the number of voters over the next year. Because, you know, if we're spending your money, we really want you to vote for us. Like, you should have a say in who's going to represent you. But,
do you have ideas for how you're going to do that? For how you're going to increase the voting?
So actually that was part of one of our platform points too. It's called the Roll the Vote campaign. We think, one idea that we think will be more accessible for all students, since we do have a large number of international students, English isn't often a first language, so we want to find ways to allow the ballot to be written in multiple languages. So if you need to read it in Spanish, it's more accessible for you if that's how you feel most comfortable voting, because it can be easier to understand and know what's happening than if you're reading it in your main language that you grew up with. Other ways, surprisingly, we are finding a lot of success with literally paper posters in student government. Flyers hung up around campus. We're trying to get more Supreme Court justices. So this is a take. If you want to be a Supreme Court justice, hit me up. I can help you. For student government, not of the United States.
I was just to specify, just to separate.
Yes. And they've had some good success with those flyers hung up around campus. So I think just by like finding simple ways. Sometimes I think we think too deeply about a subject rather than just looking at it from an outside view of like, what should we go back and do the baby steps again?
I think a Canvas notification would be really nice too. Like
Yeah?
we have those like the flags that pop up like.
Oh, I
like,
never thought about
today
that.
is like whatever day. Like you'll have little flags that pop up. Like
Yeah.
if you could find a way to get Canvas to notify, I'm sure that'll get a lot of people because everyone's on campus or Canvas for their.
Right.
Yeah, Canvas is an awesome web app, and I think like you could do anything with it. So maybe try to get. I think that'd be a cool idea to get like a hey to vote for your student government, like just a
Yeah.
little flag that comes up and then a link or something.
Definitely, we can note that. That'll be something that we could look into.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. So are there is there anything else about the campaign that you want people to know? Like any things that helped you? What were some of the struggles that you had if you were to kind of like try to breed the next generation of, you know?
I would say my biggest point of information, recommendations for if you are going to campaign, do not take a heavy course load that semester because I started out the semester with like 21 credits and then I tested out of one of my classes because I was like, I know what's going on. I don't need to be here, but I need the credits. And then I had to drop a class because there was just too much going on at one time. So definitely know your limits because I started to figure out my limits throughout the semester because all I wanted to do was focus on the campaign because like I was so passionate about it and I was so excited and ready to take it on. But I just was like, I don't really want to do the student part of this job anymore.
Yeah.
But sadly, you do have to do that.
Yes. It's a big aspect of it. Yeah.
Yes. So make sure you take that into consideration when you're planning because even though campaigning is only like 4 to 5 weeks of the semester, you then have the transition period, which is going to be pretty heavy. We were doing a lot of meetings during the transition period. I had to learn how to properly run a Senate meeting, all of those duties. And then you're inaugurated and you just hit the ground running. So definitely make sure that you plan a semester of like ease to be able to balance it all.
Very, very good advice. And that probably goes with a lot of things too. Like make sure you're juggling effectively.
Yes.
So I kind of wanted to pivot to get to understand where you've been in media and like working with media and like with the podcasting, with the radio, with news. So I guess just first off, walk me through like the things that you've done in that regard.
Okay,
like,
yeah.
Who you've worked for, like how, just tell me your story when it comes to like working with media.
Okay, so my media story, although I have a lot to share, it actually only started in May of 2022. So a year ago now. So I had ran for state FFA office and I lost. And then a couple weeks later, I had this email show up in my inbox and it was from a man named Bob Quinn. And let me tell you, that email is one of the best things to have ever happened to me because it was just, hey, I work for WHO Radio. I host the big show. You should apply for this internship. And he got my email because someone within the Iowa FFA Association had like recommended me for it. And I was, first of all, very honored for that. And then at first I was like, I'm not interested in radio. Like I had never like thought about that as a career path before, but obviously call my parents. I hit them up and I tell my dad about it. And he's like, Bob Quinn reached out to you? That's so crazy. And I was like, I have no idea who this man is. Like, who is Bob Quinn? And my dad was just like, he was fangirling. He
Uh-huh.
really was. So I applied because I didn't have an internship lined up for the summer yet. And I was lucky enough to actually get a phone call from Bob as I was driving to a concert. And he called me and I connected over my phone or my car. And I was like, hey, is this Bob? And he was like, yeah, is this Jennifer? And we did our little phone interview there because he was like, if you're going to be on the radio, we don't need to be in person. We're going to do it over the phone. So luckily I did an interview while I was driving to a concert, and he called me a week later and offered me the position. And then, I was terrified because I was like, I've never had a real job before. Like, how does this work? I had a chicken business when I was in high school. I used to babysit, but like working for someone other than like my dad or a parent, yeah, totally new.
Yeah.
So I reached out to a girl named Lydia Johnson, who actually had the internship a couple summers before me. And she was the senior director of communications in student government, the girl who like helped me get into student government.
It all loops around.
It does, yes. And I was like, okay, Lydia, like give me the downsides, like give me like all the details of like what do I wear, how do I act, like what is the vibe of this? Because like I've been to small town radios, but then like this radio was a lot bigger. And so she gave me all the details, walked in on my first day, and I was definitely overdressed. But I talked to Bob and he got me looped in. And at the time I was also working with someone else who was a co-host with Bob. But Bob and his co-host, his name is Andy. Andy was based out of Cedar Rapids, not Des Moines. But I didn't know that Andy was based out of Cedar Rapids. I'm sorry, I'm going on a side tangent, but I think this is so funny. And Bob, he is a jokester. That's for sure. He loves to trick people. And this was May when I met Bob. He had me call Andy on the first day. I didn't meet Andy until the tractor ride, which is like a big event that they have every summer, late June. And that is when I learned that Andy doesn't work in Des Moines. He works in Cedar Rapids. And Bob would just always tell me that Andy was out of the office, but he never said like what out of the office means. So that's how I figured out.
Mystery Andy, who never shows up to work ever.
Right? I was like, how is he on the radio every day, but he's never here?
He should have said that he doesn't want to see you. That's what
Honestly.
it is. Yeah, he doesn't want to meet Jennifer.
That would have been a little funny. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, no, when I figured that out, my brain just imploded. I was just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
But yeah, so over that summer, I learned all about kind of how to work behind the scenes with the radio, how to do interviews. I never got to do anything live at that time period, but I did a lot of pre-recorded interviews, was taught how to do the markets, write articles, run social media and whatnot. So then we end the normal internship and we roll around to let's see here. It was like November-ish time frame. And so with this internship, I became a part of the National Association of Farm Broadcasting, and they were offering a networking dinner. I go to this networking dinner with Andy because he was in town. And so I'm like, okay, Andy, like I know no one here. So he like walked me around, introduced me. And that is when we ran into my new boss. Her name's Delaney Howell. And I actually sat down by her and we ate dinner together, talked all that night. And I talked about how I kind of had been thinking about beginning my own podcast because I was really loving the whole radio gig and I wanted to continue practicing that. And some advice that I'd been given was to begin a podcast or work for a podcast to keep that skill frame up. And so I didn't get like her card or anything, like no information. All I remembered was her name was Delaney Howell. So I spent the next day literally searching for her email because I wanted to reach back out. Because one thing that I remember from like all of these like networking things that they recommend you go to your first year of college to like learn how life works, you know, was reach out to someone after you meet them just so like they have your contact info. So that's what I wanted to do. And I was given like everybody else at the table's contact info and I couldn't find Delaney's anywhere. And finally I found it, sent her an email, and it didn't go through. Like it came back through and it said like email failed to send. And I was like, what? So then I had to find a different email and that one worked. And I'm so happy it did because a week later, Delaney and I met up at a coffee shop and we talked about her internship that she has that is through her marketing / podcast company. Actually, they're two separate companies, but in the end, I work for both of them. So right now, I am specifically working for her podcast that she co-hosts. It's Ag News Daily, but she owns or runs a podcast company called Global Ag Network, which I will work more with over this summer once the school year ends. But she also owns a marketing company called Ag Culture Marketing, and I will do some work with that company as well when we hit summertime. But so I got that internship with her November. So then I was like, yes, don't have to go to career fair, don't have to do any of this like anymore. I am set. And so then we get to December and Bob calls me and he's like, hey, I need you to come host the big show. And I was like, whoa, you taught me how to do pre-recorded things. You did not teach me how to go live. But you know, we went for it. And then I got to host the big show, probably like 10 to 15 times. Lydia co-hosted it with me a few times. And then there was another guy that I had worked with a little bit over the summer. His name is Scott Sloan. Co-hosted it with me, I think, twice. And it was a blast. And so by getting to do that, I got to pick out 8 people to have call into the radio that day and interview them live on the air. I learned so much more about how markets work. Very complicated. Will not get into it because, you know, it's not interesting. I mean, it is for some people, not interesting for me, but I learned how it works. And yeah, so that really built up my skills. And so I do work with them every once in a while now if I have the availability. But now I'm full force in my podcasting internship with Delaney.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you really are just full throttle, dipping your toes in every like facet of media and podcasting. What awesome opportunities to get. Like, I am jealous. That's so cool that you've, I mean, and these are professionals too. These aren't like students. Like Melanie and Bob aren't like students. They're like full adults who this is their career doing this.
Right.
And then you are getting an opportunity to like host and be a part of this and work on these shows with them. I mean, that's so awesome. And because you sent me a link to, I believe it was the big show.
Okay.
I'm not sure because I don't have Apple. I'm an Android user, so I don't have Apple, so I couldn't actually listen to it. But you had sent me that, but I didn't know that you had sent me something you were behind the scenes, but I didn't know that you had hosted like for like an entire season of a podcasting show. And then what were some of the things that you learned like through this? Like, I guess talk me through like what were you actually doing, and then about like podcasting, about like how could you help me podcasting or like other people trying to get into media? Like, what were some of the things that you learned about just everything, really?
Yeah. Honestly, I'm definitely still learning a lot, but I think going from radio to podcasting was hard because radio, with it being so like you do it, it airs, it's over. And podcasting is you do it, you listen to it, you listen to it, you listen to it, you edit it, and then you ship it out there. And even if you ship it out there and there's mistakes, you can still bring it back in and refix it and then send it back out. So definitely it has made me a more detail-oriented individual, that's for sure. So I guess advice, wow, that's hard because I definitely am still learning myself. It would be to be very open to advice, I guess, is like listen to as many podcasts as possible. Find as much like insights, figure out what you like and what you don't like. Because now that I've started to like work with specifically Ag News Daily, and then I listen to other podcasts, I can definitely tell like which ones are more of like, we edit it, we ship it out and it's done, kind of like how radio is, compared to we record it, we edit it, we edit it, we edit it, and then we ship it out. And like, it's all up to like your own preference too of what you truly want to make of it. Like, I feel like podcasting is such a diverse industry. Like, you do not have to fit a mold within it, but there's so many different like paths that you could go down, but you also like don't want to go down all of the paths at the same time because then you just aren't going to get very many places, I guess. That's kind of like my roundabout way of like, listen to as many possible podcasts as you can because it will help you figure out what your preference and style is. and also like figure out what you should and shouldn't say for like the vibe, because I'm more of a relaxed person, I'm 20. I still think of myself as a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
I definitely use like younger people lingo. But then I figured out like when you're recording like this professional podcast, like you cannot do that quite as much. Like you have to figure out what lingo you can and cannot use, what fits the age bracket for people listening. Because with the podcast that I work for, it's definitely more of an age bracket like a little bit above me, compared to like your podcast is definitely going to be more like college student age bracket, so we can use that lingo and people will understand what we're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess that would be some advice I have.
So how did you receive that, like, that criticism, that when somebody would give you feedback, like how would you receive that? Was that from an audience, like you're looking at the numbers and analyzing what's working, or is that from like a higher up being like, hey, maybe don't use that word because I don't know what that means?
So actually, the first time that I ever even thought about it was when I was working at the radio station, actually. And the radio station has a text line. Didn't discover that till like halfway through the time when I was like co-hosting or hosting it live. And it was a day when Lydia and I were doing it, and like a text came in, and some lady was just like, do not like say what's up or what's down, or like I don't even remember exactly like what I said, but like it was like very like simple lingo that I was like, this makes sense to everybody. But she just was like not impressed by it because she felt like it wasn't professional enough. And so what, like, I took that kind of like hard at first. Like, I was like, is there something wrong with me? Like, am I not good? Like, like thoughts start flooding in. Like, you get your first like hater on the internet, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm not good at this anymore. Yeah. But then like I talked to my bosses, and they were like, honestly, like take that with a grain of salt, but it definitely like does make you think more about what you like should or shouldn't say. Because on the radio station, they were like, honestly, take that with a grain of salt. Like, you don't need to think about that. Like, keep doing what you're doing. But then when it came to podcasting, before I had started taking over editing the podcast, I started listening to it daily to like listen to what they were saying, and pick up of how it works and everything, how it flows and jams together. And I was like, okay, so radio station, my bosses say it's okay to use this lingo, ignore the haters. But listening to this podcast, I definitely need to like take a more of a professional standpoint and keep lingo in general kind of out and use, real words and do that.
So I want to kind of understand what your time commitment and what your workload is when it comes to editing a podcast, because I listen to, and I'm going to be soon, I get hopefully a guest on a podcast about video game music, which is
nice.
Very interesting podcast. And he has episodes that are like 2.5 hours long, and it's talking with music in the background, interluded with music. Then they talk about that piece, and that happens 20 times. And I think about it, it's like, it would take forever to edit that and put that together. And I make videos, like I make YouTube videos.
Yeah.
And so I edit a lot too. And I'm working on a 15-minute video. It was only like 30 minutes of raw footage. I've put 8 hours into it, and I still have like 5 more. And so it's like, walk me through like your workload when it comes to editing and working on a podcast, because I'm just trying to imagine it, and it's difficult to even grasp for me.
Yeah. So the podcast that I specifically work for, it's a 30-minute podcast, and it's daily. So Monday through Friday, typically, so Tuesday through Friday, it's released in the morning. Monday, it's released in the afternoon because we call it Market Monday. So it's released once markets are closed.
Okay.
It kind of varies on the day. When I first started editing, it was probably taking me like 1.5 to 2 hours to edit one episode, because like I was still picking up on like how exactly the program works and was making sure like very articulate, not making mistakes. And then I realized I was like 2 hours a day. Like, I cannot be doing this during the school year. Like because I started over winter break, so I was able to take that transition period. But when the school year hits, I was like, my class schedule is not going to allow me 2 hours like at this specific time frame, because the news that they have also like has to be released within a certain time that they record it to make it like as relevant as possible. So I really just started to like chip down, and I was like, okay, focus. So with the first 15 minutes, they record that every day. It's news and whatnot. The second 15 minutes is an interview. So the interview can be pre-recorded like ahead of time. So like I get that typically edited before the day of. So I can edit the interview at night and spend some extra time like more focusing on that versus the news when they record that in the morning. So then when I piece it together, it's just pretty quick. So I guess now I only spend probably in total an hour per episode because I have also figured out how to just like make things quicker, make edits like more fast, or like what's important to cut out and what's not. And then there's days too that do take a little bit longer. Like if there's a time when like news is stumbled upon or like coughs or sneezes happen in the middle, you have to make sure you edit those out. And a big pet peeve of mine is when I am like looking at the audio on Adobe Audition, I can tell when they breathe. And so like I try to cut out the breaths because like I can listen to that in the podcast, but I think most people don't really notice it, but I do.
Now that you said that, everyone listening to this podcast is going to be like very acutely aware of every breath that was taken during every conversation.
Yeah, that's very, very true.
Yeah, because I couldn't. So what I'm struggling with this podcast specifically is, first off, there's not a lot of moments. I'm trying to find a way to advertise using like TikTok or Instagram.
Okay.
So like here's a 1 minute clip of something that is interesting, but it's how do you edit that down into 1 minute? And most clips are much longer than 1 minute, and so they have to be edited down. But I don't edit this podcast. That's kind of the purpose of it, is that it's like unfiltered, unedited conversation.
Right.
And so looking through that and finding that clip and then editing it, it takes so long. And I'm just wondering, so like how much out of a recording session, how much are you editing out? Like how much time? So when you say editing, do you mean you're chopping up like conversations and putting them together, or are you like using you're using Audition, but are you like messing with sound, like changing frequencies on each clip? Like what are you like what exactly are you editing?
So I leave like the frequency and the sound quality alone. Typically it's recorded well enough that we don't have to worry about that. But I edit out like the mess ups, the ums, the breaths, the long pauses because they needed to take an extra time to think, just things like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So like I guess the editing is a little different with this. When I was at the radio station, we definitely did do like a little bit more editing. Like if we were recording at a fair and there was too much noise in the background, we learned kind of how to edit it a little bit to get that background noise out, which is really hard to do. I thought, but you know, you learn.
So I put a filter on it and then call it good. If you asked me to do it myself, well, it's so interesting because every podcast is so wildly different. Like that's kind of what you're saying. Like if you're going to listen to whichever podcast, you can't take an aspect from every podcast and try to put it into one because some things just don't mesh together.
Right.
But what's the vibe of the podcast that you're working on, and how do you work to express that vibe? Like what do you do to express that vibe?
So I would say it's an educational and newsworthy podcast, I would say. So it depends on like the route that you are wanting to go for. Because the first 15 minutes is news. So like typically it's good for like producers and farmers if they're wanting to keep up on what's going on around the US and the world. They like to listen to that. But if you're more interested in learning about like on Tuesdays, we call it Tech Tuesday. So we find something interesting that's happening technology-wise related to the agriculture industry for that. So if you're more interested in just like learning about different things going on in the ag industry, but not really like news things, like more of like the details of everything back behind the scenes, that's what you want to go for. So it kind of almost is like two routes put together, but with the transition music, it kind of flows well, and they try to like keep the hosting the same. So like typically when I first joined, they were like, when you do an interview yourself, Jennifer, we're going to try and have like one of us there. And it kind of just has not happened. They've just kind of like let me go off on my own and do the interviews myself, which makes it a lot easier. I do like coordinate with them so they can still do some interviews too. It's just a lot harder with like coordinating schedules and everything like that. But I guess like to fit the vibe is very much so remembering the tone of voice, I think. Because like if it's me doing the interview and Delaney and Tanner doing the news portion of the podcast, I need to think about when I'm doing the interview what their tone is going to be for the first half of the podcast, so I could kind of match that for the second half, because then it flows and pieces together better.
So it's not like super chill at the beginning and then you're bringing a ton of energy and excitement like during the interview.
Exactly.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so walk me through your interview process then. So like when you're interviewing somebody, what makes a good interviewer? What are some things that you've learned about like asking the right questions? Do you have your questions pre-planned, or do you kind of just go with the flow? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, so it really depends on the subject, because there are some subjects I'm a heck of a lot more knowledgeable about than others. So it's like today, actually, this morning, I did an interview with, his name was Chuck Strand. He is the executive director of a company called Rural Minds. So it's all about mental health for the agriculture industry. And I am major advocate for mental health. So I did not have an issue coming up with questions to talk about with Chuck. But I did an interview with the North Dakota Secretary of Agriculture a couple weeks ago. And my boss wanted me to talk to him about floods happening in North Dakota. And I'm like, not knowledgeable about that.
Yeah.
So she helped me come up with questions, did like some research while I was on the interview too, because sometimes like they'll say something and I'm like, okay, I don't know what that is. I need to look it up. And so then when I figure that out, I'm like, okay, well, if I don't know what that is, that means listeners might not know also. So then that kind of shows that that's a good question to ask and kind of get further into, I think.
Wow. Because the whole interview process it's a very delicate line, because if you're trying to especially when it comes to a podcast where you're going to edit down to the most interesting or watchable and informative information, you have to find a way to ask questions that get to that point as directly as possible.
Right.
Like as quickly as possible. Whereas in like a format like this, it can and should take a while to get to those points, because we really want to like get to know you and like what you're like. But in an interview where it's more information based, it's like, how do we format these questions to where you actually answer them really quickly and effectively? And so do you have tips or tricks to kind of elicit that responses, like examples of good questions, bad questions? Like how do you formulate your stuff to make sure that it's a good question?
So I guess when I'm setting up a interview with someone, I ensure that they know the topic that we are talking about beforehand, because then that will mean that if they're nervous for it, they can already have their notes ready. Some people actually specifically ask for a list of questions. So I will write maybe 5 questions out and send them to them. And I say, remember, the interview is 10 to 15 minutes long. If we don't get to all of these questions, that's okay. But it's better to get to all of these questions so we can get the best information out as possible. So it's kind of like I send those tips to the people that we're interviewing ahead of time, so they kind of already have that in mind. But then on top of that, so with the topics that I'm already knowledgeable about, I think for a lot of people, it's easier to come up with questions for those. But on the ones that we're not knowledgeable about, I do go through and I read like articles, do some research on them to figure out what people should know. Because just because I don't know something also doesn't mean the listeners don't already know it, because I am younger, so they do have some more knowledge about certain things in the industry that I don't. So by kind of finding ways to get myself up to speed to where they are, then I can come up with better questions that can help get directly to the point of what the listeners actually are wanting to know.
Yeah, and it's kind of like putting the ball in their court, like making them as prepared and effective as possible, so you don't really have to do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to that. Yeah, the podcasting thing is so cool, and it seems like it's kind of a newer media that's taken shape and kind of exploding, especially since COVID, and most people kind of just wanted to sit and talk.
Yes. And actually, speaking of that, this is actually terrifying. I got an email this morning from the National Association of Farm Broadcasting, and apparently there are car producers that aren't putting AM radio in cars anymore. So they're cutting talk radio. So that means a lot of people are going to start turning to podcasts, which is, good for us. Sad for AM radio, which is also sad for the Big Show, because that's what the Big Show's on. It is on other stations on FM, but most people listen to it through 1040 AM. But that means podcasting is going to become even bigger. And I do know, I listen to a lot of of my favorite TikTokers. They started podcasts and things like that, because they can do it quicker and get more info out there. Because like I don't know about you, but if I'm on like a road trip by myself, I get tired of listening to music, so I want to listen to a podcast. Yeah, I agree. Like with COVID starting and people just wanting to sit around and talk, and it's an easy media form to be able to just like, if you want it to be like for real, you just don't have to do that much editing and you just ship it out.
Yeah, and that's the big, like with my show's so lazy especially when it comes to a podcast, because it's literally just like relying on my ability to ask questions and relying on the other person to just be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But for other people that are like workshopping this like really creative podcast, and it's funny because you mentioned like your favorite TikTokers, you're watching them, and it's like, yeah, you have a bunch of like actors, comedians, YouTubers, TikTokers who are like, I do this medium, and then COVID hit, and now I can't really work. What can I do? Well, I probably just talk for an hour and then and then put it out there. And so that, I think that's why podcasting is so huge, and it's like this big thing. And I didn't know about the AM radio. I didn't know about. Honestly, I don't know a ton of people who actually listen to AM radio, so I'm not gonna act like that's a big travesty on my end, but I understand how that could definitely bring some people, and I think radio is becoming less interesting in general to most people as well, because podcasting it's kind of like the difference between Netflix and TV.
Right.
You know, it's like, why do I have to listen at 8:00 every night when I could just listen whenever I want?
Exactly. I guess I never put that into consideration, but yeah, no, that makes a lot more sense, because even myself, I like to watch Netflix more than I like to watch like actual TV now, because it's just like, I remember, okay, but these are like nostalgic experiences that kids aren't going to get anymore. Like when you were a child, did you ever just get to like have one person, like your sibling, has to sit at the TV and yell for you if you're like going to the bathroom when it's on commercial, because like you couldn't pause it then? But now, like with Netflix, you can just pause it whenever and go take a break.
Or having to record your episodes on like a DVR or something, or like you missed Modern Family today, so you're gonna have to watch it tomorrow instead.
Right.
Yeah, so you just missed that episode.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, no, putting that into perspective in comparison of radio to podcasting, yeah, I get that.
Well, I think it's interesting too, because it really just is an infinite avenue of different content, and that's what I thought. You're taking a really nuanced route into agriculture in general. Like nobody is lumping agriculture and like podcast media together. You know what I mean? Nobody's like, oh yeah, of course you work in ag. Of course you're in an ag podcast. Like that. Nobody's really thinking about that, but it shows like what are the different options. And so I think that's cool that you had combined those two things, and then now you have like the student government and the leadership positions that you had before, and so now you're like this public entity. Yeah, I mean, it seems like you're kind of famous at this point, because
Why?
you have like all these different things. That was another question. With the radio stations that you had worked for and do work for, do you have like, how many people listen to that? Do you know the numbers on that, or do you have a rough estimate?
I really don't have like a good estimate, because the 1040 AM I know for sure covers the state of Iowa. My boss, every once in a while, he'd mention like about how it's like national, or it used to be national. So I guess I'm confused on if it still is national or not, because it's like one of those topics where it's like you feel like you should know, so you're too scared to ask.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That's what my
I totally
thought is.
understand. Totally understand.
But I'll get like someone that listened to me on the radio found my personal Facebook page and messaged me on it, like requested to send me a message, like saying like, oh my goodness, I loved listening to you. And I'm like, wow, the fact that you were able to find me, that's crazy.
Kind of scary, but
Yeah.
also really flattering.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm reaching like a good number of audience members, because I also know like it's such a small world when like no matter where you go, if you start talking about this subject and like someone across the room is like listening into your conversation and they're like, wait a minute, that was you that I listened to? And like, cause like I've had experiences like that, and I was like, whoa, you listened to the radio? like the aisle was on. That's crazy.
Yeah, that is super crazy.
So I feel like maybe I just happened to be in the right places at the right time, but I feel like it's a pretty good general audience.
If you were to lowball me like a number of the kind of people that you reach,
Oh
like
my.
you could even give me a humongous range. Like I want to know like what the starting number and like ending number of possibility is for you.
Oh brother, you're giving me a hard question here. Because okay, so I should make it clear that the radio station itself isn't only agriculture. The show that I worked for was agriculture. So like in the morning, there's a show that started at 5 a.m. and went till 9 a.m. And it was just like early morning news, traffic report, everything. And then there was like one in the afternoon that was more politics related. So it's like a big diversity. So it draws in a lot of, the station itself draws in a lot of crowds from different like industries. So I don't know. I just want to say like the ag population of Iowa.
Okay.
That's
Which
what I want
is
to
a lot
generalize.
because Iowa is like the ag state.
Yeah.
So
do you know what the population of Iowa even is? Because I do not.
I got memed on because I got it so horrifically wrong. I was having a conversation. We were talking about one of my buddy who has like 1 million views on a TikTok. And I was like,
Okay.
if you were to put that in perspective, that would be like double the population of Iowa, which is not even close to correct. I believe it's 3 million. Like
Okay.
3 or 4 million ish. I literally got a message from everybody. It's like, you guys are the dumbest people. And I feel I feel scared to even say 3-4 million because I might be wrong again, but I think that's it. I think that's
Okay, I kind of wanted to ballpark that too, but I was scared that I was going to be wrong.
Now that I'm self-aware that people are listening and like fact checking, the buddy who did it is normally the person who's in the booth,
Okay.
who like fact checks things, but he's so busy, our schedules don't align ever.
Yeah.
And so he was like, dude, I wish I was there so I could have just dunked on you guys when you're saying that because it's so wrong. But yeah, my guess is 3 to 4 million.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's still.
I'm going to say that we do not get 3 to 4 million listeners.
Yeah, that would
that would be astronomical.
Nuts. Yeah, that'd be most TV stations don't get that.
No.
Like
No.
even like Saturday Night Live doesn't get 3 million people watching.
I want to say we get like a good like I want to ballpark like 15,000 listeners a day maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to ballpark it at. I might be entirely wrong, but like I feel like it's like the station is through iHeartMedia. So I feel like iHeartMedia is pretty popular, and like then they turn all of the shows into podcasts and post it on the iHeartMedia app, so you can listen to it anywhere technically. So that's where the national aspect of it does come in. I just piece two things together.
Yeah, maybe that. Yeah, you're on a national platform, but you broadcast
in Iowa.
In Iowa.
Yes. Okay. We got this now. So that's gonna be like my ballpark range. Might be wrong. Might be kind of right. I don't know.
Well, and I think one an advantage / disadvantage is when you put your podcast into a niche and it's like I'm talking about this thing. Like I talk about this content. You're not going to get people really outside of that realm, but you're going to get everybody in that realm.
Right.
And so if you pick a big enough realm and there's not enough competition, you have really good chances.
Yes. Now with the podcast itself, I actually do pull those downloads. So I know each podcast, since it's a daily podcast and it's like the day it's varied, it kind of like the time of day it's posted kind of varies. Listeners do kind of vary from day to day, but
topics
yes,
vary as well.
Exactly. But like with listeners on that, on average, we get like 1,000 to 2,000 listeners.
That's awesome.
So
That's awesome.
yeah.
And then who is the podcast through?
Like the company?
Yeah. Like, what platform is that on? Like,
Okay. So the Ag News Daily is the podcast that I'm specifically working for right now. And it's through Global Ag Network, which has its own website, globalagnetwork.com. But then you can also access the Ag News Daily podcast through Spotify or Apple. And I think Google Podcasts too. But I've never checked out Google Podcasts.
I've never even heard. I have heard of Google Podcasts before, but I don't know a single soul who has ever used Google Podcasts before. Some people don't even use Spotify, so Google Podcasts is a step in the wrong direction for sure. But yeah, I don't know, the podcast scene is cool, and I guess what have you? Are there any like things that you have discovered, because you have so many people who are trying to start a podcast? You have so many you have everybody trying doing podcasts started. I mean, the State of Things just started like last semester, I believe, or this semester, kind of.
Yeah. I don't really know exactly when it started. Sometime within this past year.
Well, I am curious about the State of Things.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of like the guru, like hopping onto this. Like they could not have found a better person to come and do the State of Things and like figure that out. By the way, you want to explain what the State of Things is? I want to hear about that from your perspective.
Okay, yeah. So I do not know everything about the State of Things. I should know more about it than what I actually do, but I don't. But that's okay. It's a student government-based podcast, and we kind of use it as an outreach tool. So the president and vice president at the time will be the hosts of the podcast. So Emily and I get to be the hosts of this upcoming year, which is super stoked for that. This past year, the way they did it was they would have someone come in and they would interview them, and it'd be someone from campus. So one time they had Dr. Toya Younger come. They had Jeff Johnson. They had all these different amazing people from across the campus of Iowa State join to interview. And I think the episodes were typically like an hour to an hour and a half long. Emily and I are looking at ways to reshape that over this next year. To fit like a new form, but we don't know exactly what that looks like yet. But changes in the future, but we will be continuing the State of Things.
Yeah, which is I love the State of Things. I think it's awesome. And I guess I listen. They have a producer segment as well, where in the near the beginning of the episode, after they do the introductions, the producers will get on, and it occasionally gets longer and longer. And there was like 25-minute producer segment where they were just chatting. And I was like, I love listening to this. This is really wholesome to just like get to know these three people three people producing a podcast. Extraordinarily envious of that, first off. I would love to have three people working on this. But are you going to continue having those producers? Like, do you know them? Like,
it's Sundar and Maddie and Ethan. And all three of them are leaving.
Oh.
Yeah, Sundar and Maddie are both graduating. And then Ethan is taking some time to go do some different things outside of school. So we are going to have all new producers this next year. But I believe the people that are interested in doing it are going to be awesome. So,
okay. Yeah. Shout out. We'll miss the old producer segments. Very legendary. A lot of music talk. But the new ones will be, if not better. So I'm very excited to see what you do, with the State of Things, because I think that's a really good idea too, because the president and vice president really don't exist past election season, and then the very few times that they might get to speak, like at like Destination Iowa State or like other things like that.
Right.
And so it's nice to have like, okay, I can actually see what they're doing, what they're talking about. Like,
yeah.
That whole thing. And I'm very curious to see do you have any ideas just right off the top of your head of where you want to take that, what you want to do with that?
Well, okay, so I'm going to say this because Emily already said it, and this is going to be on the next, the last episode of this first season of the State of Things, because Emily and I get to participate in it. So you'll see that soon.
Ooh.
Yes. No, it should be released in the near future. But Emily said that she has connections with Matt Campbell. So we're going to find a way to get him on.
Wow.
Yep. I think so. Matt, if you're listening, please email JEN2539 and reach out for the State of Things. Okay.
And from homie to homie, if you ever want to send anybody my way, I would love to talk to really anybody that you guys interview. I want to have Winterstein on here. I want to have Toy Younger on here. Definitely want to have these people on this podcast.
Oh my goodness. Dr. Younger would love to do this. I can already tell you, she is such an amazing woman.
I know. She gave a speech. I'm a cyclone aide this summer. And then she gave a speech to us. And I was like, I really would love to have you on here. I was too scared to go and ask her, but I'm going to email her probably next semester when I have like a first season catalog.
Yes.
Because I got my first staff 4 episodes ago. So
that's
awesome. It's been students, but yeah, please send them over my way. Name drop, like, hey, if you liked the podcast, go talk to Elijah. That would be sick. If I had oh man, anybody email me, like any big staff email me, being like, hey, we heard about your show. Whew. Be a big deal.
Yeah, that would be very impressive because let me tell you, the first time that like a big name person emails you, your heart literally drops to your stomach. Emily and I got our first email from Wendy Winterstein a few weeks ago. And let me tell you, President Winterstein, when her name pops up on your phone saying like you got an email from President Winterstein, you're like, what?
Yeah, that's like a presidential pardon. That's like getting the presidential SOS on your phone or something. Oh, it's like getting a text from Biden like right now. Like, oh, that'd be that'd be so cool. Because I've tried to reach out to 3 staff, and they're all just like busy. What do they think they have going on in their lives that they can't come to? But they're all like busier. One of them had an actual reason that I agreed with, but other than that, like I am definitely trying to get
some more staff
get those
in?
staff connections. But,
Yeah.
And also shout out on the state of things would be great because they had that like advertising section. I need to become a student org, so I can officiate that. But I'm excited. I love the state of things, and it's cool. Getting a professional in the ring, because at this point you are just a professional, whether you like it or not. Getting a professional in the ring on the state of things would be pretty sick.
Yeah.
For sure.
Now, listeners, take the word professional with a grain of salt.
Yeah, say I am denoting professional to her. Okay, I have that power.
Well, I am very impressed that I am considered a professional now.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is an honor. Put that
Thank
put
you.
that on your along your list of things that you do. Oh yeah, I think that's all I got for you. I think we've been going for a bit over an hour now.
Oh,
so
wow.
I told you it's it's a quick hour.
Yeah.
Please, if there's any plugging you would like to do now, advertising for your multitude of things, go ahead and just give out all your emails, all the links, everything that you got.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, first of all, if anyone's interested in joining student government, please let me know because I got you. We will find a place for you. It's going to be a great year over this next little under 12 months now for student government, but please, we want you. Listen to The Big Show. Please save AM radio. But The Big Show is also on the iHeartMedia app, so you can listen to it there. Listen to Ag News Daily, like I mentioned, globalagnetwork.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts. There's other podcasts that you can check out on Global Ag Network too that I don't produce or participate in, but they're good too. They are very good. I'll give them credit. I think that's all I got for now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was awesome having you on, Jennifer.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you asked me because it's been a blast.
Yeah. Good. Alrighty.